Good afternoon, everyone. Here we are, the last day. Are we all breathing a sigh of relief? Right? We were talking at lunch that it feels like these conferences, right? There's a natural ebb and flow. You get so excited and so amped up, and then the last day, you start to breathe a little bit. So I'm really excited to see everyone here today. My name is Jodi Manning. I'm the Director of Corporate Partnerships and Marketing for Cool Effect. And we're here today to talk about the intersection between land use and local communities. And I'm so excited about this panel because we didn't all know each other before, and now we do. We're now fast friends, and I hope that you've all experienced the same thing at this wonderful conference as well. So I'll just start by saying Cool Effect was founded by Dee and Richard Lawrence. We are a nonprofit in the San Francisco Bay Area, and our mission is to shine a light on the highest quality carbon projects in the world and to match them with corporate buyers. So not surprisingly, we have all different types of buyers that come to Cool Effect to look at our projects for a variety of different reasons. But I can tell you time and time again, after we get through the financials and we get through the science, the top question they ask is, how is the funding being used? How does the funding impact the local community? So Dee and Richard, in their experience, having started a carbon project 20 years ago, what inspired a Cool Effect is the passionate belief that if a carbon project is done correctly, it can be transformative to a local community. So our three panelists here are here to provide examples and to answer a lot of questions about that. So I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves, and we'll start with Javier.
Thank you, Jodi. Again, happy Thursday to all of the fellow conference goers. It's an honor to be part of this year's conference as well. The Climate Action Reserve is a strong partner of the Yurok tribe, and anytime we have the opportunity to speak again with the esteemed colleagues on the panels, as well as meeting Jodi, is always wonderful. My name's Javier Kinney. I'm serving as the Carbon Project Manager for the Yurok tribe. We're the largest tribe in California with approximately 7,000 tribal citizens. Our ancestral territory comprises of about 6% of the California coastline, 47 miles along the Klamath and Trinity rivers, and then also 200 miles out off of the coast. So we've entered the carbon markets and want to share that story with you here today in regards to the intersections of land use as well as the tribal communities, not only here within the state of California and the ancestral territory, but how we've been able to engage at the local, state, and international levels. So thank you, Jodi.
Absolutely. Christina.
Hi, thank you to everyone for being here, first of all, on this last afternoon. And I want to thank the Climate Action Reserve for inviting me and Jodi for convening us and organizing us and bringing us together. So again, my name is Christina McCain. My consulting practice is Ecosophy Collaborative Consulting. But I came to this field, I guess I want to explain, long ago as a tropical forest ecologist, working in the Brazilian Amazon. And my work as an ecologist was really totally divorced from, considerations of the social, the economic, and community factors around the deforestation that I was studying. And as I went through that process of completing that research and thinking about what I was going to do next, I was really thinking about drivers. I was documenting what was happening, but what is driving the deforestation? Why is this continuing to happen? And what can I do about that? And as we all know, the drivers of deforestation are economic drivers. And so what are the levers that we can use to halt that deforestation and start putting the forests back that have already been destroyed? So this led me into questions of international relations and federal policy. So I worked in the federal government at the U.S. Department of State on questions of environmental policy internationally, and then in the NGO space for many, many years on advocating for policies to construct and provide market incentives for high-quality jurisdictional programs to reduce deforestation and forest degradation. And then the last couple of years before launching my consulting practice, working in the philanthropic space with an alliance that actually funds land use and climate change sector. So I am really excited to be on this panel and be talking about this. I come from most of my career from a jurisdictional kind of large-scale policy versus project space, but I am so excited to talk about the intersections with projects around land use, the benefits to communities, and the principles that underlie high-quality programs, projects, and benefits for communities around that, and look forward to having this discussion this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Christina. Rosendo, please go ahead. We'd love to hear about you.
Okay, thank you, Jodi. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I know that most of you have to take flights later this afternoon to go back home or go back to your jobs. It's good to see a lot of known faces around here. My name is Rosendo Perez Antonio. I work for a Mexican nonprofit named ICICO. We, for a number of years, we were only one of the only first 3 projects of carbon offsets in Mexico. And in 2014, we started developing the pilot project in San Juan La Chao alongside with Amy Kessler and John Nickerson that are present here in this room. For a number of years as well, that was the only Mexican project registered in CAR's website. And we have been developing a number of carbon offset projects across Mexico since 2014, and right now we are developing an aggregation project in the Oaxaca state of Mexico. It's where we operate, and our main focus is to have high-quality projects. Dee, Lawrence, and the Cool Effect team are very familiar with our projects, with the work we do, and I'm very, very happy to be here and be able to speak about the work we do with communities.
Very good. So we'll go through a few questions that we have for each panelist, but I will note that at the end, we're going to save some time for any questions that you guys might have, because we would love some feedback from the audience, because, you know, we're here to support whatever ideas and areas that you would like to explore as well. So Javier, I'll start with you on the hot seat. How about that? So please tell us about the Yurok tribe and the decision to enter the carbon market. What were the levers for that? What was the process? And why did the community ultimately think that it was the right thing to do?
No, thank you for the question. And, you know, we first start out with the importance of land and the connection land and the natural resources within the ancestral territory of the Yurok tribe is key and connected. There's no separation between the water, the people, the animals, and the forest. And so as you have that understanding since time immemorial, that stewardship, it's not just the Yurok people and that idea of, you know, I shared yesterday that the first governor of the state of California sought to exterminate the California Indian people. And you have 115 federally recognized tribes here, so we always make sure and have that love and respect and understanding of the areas that we come into, but also when people visit. But when you have that ability to try to reacquire 1.5 million acres, you have to have a finance mechanism to do that. So we have approximately 500 tribal employees. Over 80% of those employees are tribal citizens, but we're still having the challenges of bringing that equity and social parity within that. As our lands are healthy and vibrant and our forests, the people are healthy and vibrant. If there's challenges within that natural resources ecosystem and biodiversity, if that's sick, our people are sick. So one of the things that, you know, was mentioned is not only salmon restoration, but also the ways that the forest is interconnected with the people as well as the natural resources. So I'm in the natural resources division, and our portfolio approach has been to have our fisheries, forestry, fire department, wildland, and wildlife department, and our environmental department. And so with that portfolio approach, we're able to look at how the distinction to work together and strategically. And we have, the understanding of old is new again. So we're a very strong proponent of sciences and the ability to have not only the sources, but the academic rigor to back whatever that decision or data sovereignty is going to be. So we're continuing to build that infrastructure. The Carbon Projects is one of those components that provides that funding revenue. And so we have 3 projects. The first is the Phase 1 Carbon Project. The second is known as the CKGG, which was formerly managed by New Forest, but we've assumed that management as well as operations. A third one, which was acquired with the public for trust lands funding as well as state funding, a 2,000-acre plot that had an existing carbon project. So we're also strong partners with the state of California at this point. Our colleague Jason Gray, who's now at UCLA Law, was also one of the key factors of creating that cap and trade program. And so we believe in the integrity of not only the protocols, but the integrity of that gold standard to be able to be in this space. We're going to continue to advocate for that. But for us, we've been able to share that as doors open within the carbon market space. We were one of the first projects, not just tribal projects, but carbon projects within that cap and trade compliance markets. So we've advised the state of Washington, as well as other indigenous peoples from the global south, in showing them what our blueprint has been. And so I think conferences like this, to introduce yourself, come and not only share that information, but share expertise and skill sets is what we're continuing to do. And so as we move forward, we're going to be paradigm shifting from extractive economy to a regenerative economy, but we're also going to be on the forefront of the technological developments with our partnerships with LIDAR, space-enabled research, but creating the capabilities to do that. So there's a lot of work to be done yet, but as we share with our team, is you've got to be passionate about what you're doing. You have to wake up every morning and want to do what you do. And we do have challenges as well. There's diverse perspectives in regards to inherent sovereignty and the quantification of natural resources. For the Yurok tribe, it works for us. So with the $100 billion on the table in international finance to address the climate crisis, the Yurok tribe is seeking to raise a minimum of $1 billion of that. There's only $1.7 billion for all of indigenous peoples worldwide. So we're interested in creating a bigger pie rather than fighting over scraps. Now, once you do that, once you're able to inverse the mathematical equations of land ownership, economic and wealth management, but most importantly, the benefits of regenerative economies and biodiversities. 80% of the biodiversity in the world are on indigenous lands. 45% of the forest lands within the cap and trade program are on tribal lands. So that's going to be the key and the trend. And again, look forward to answering more questions and sharing our experience in that space.
Javier, that really is transformative. Not only did you lay the groundwork, but now you're sharing that expertise across the globe. That's really spectacular. And of course, I think we're all fascinated too by the adoption of the newer technologies that can really support the science behind what you already know to be the front lines of both the people and the communities. So thank you for that. Christina, could you talk to us about what are the key components when you're creating a carbon project from the very beginning? What should you consider? How do those considerations benefit local communities?
Yeah, and I would say too that these basic principles apply to the creation of a project of whatever scale, as well as to subnational or national programs in terms of the communities on the ground who are living in and from the forests, in most cases protecting the forests, as someone earlier said, it's been shown that indigenous communities are more effective at protecting the forests in many cases than governments, policies around protecting forests. The principles are the same for whatever scale that you're talking about. And the central question of this panel was like, can these carbon projects confer benefits to communities? I think, Jodi, you would answer that the answer to that is yes, they can. But I think what is really key is that the communities must be partners, leaders, co-leaders, protagonists, and decision makers in the process of the development of either projects or policies all the way along the conception, from the conception to the implementation to the monitoring. So FPIC, or free, prior, and informed consent, is a minimum standard when we are talking about implementing a truly inclusive project that is going to benefit communities more than stakeholders, mere stakeholders, or beneficiaries or bystanders to a project. Those real community benefits will flow when the communities are at the table as co-decision makers, and that is absolutely fundamental. So what does that inclusion look like? It looks like full and effective participation, right? Transparent sharing of information, respect for existing rights at a minimum, transparent information about the scope of the project, what the activities are going to be, what are the benefits, financial and otherwise, that are going to come from that, and who is going to get them, as well as respect for local knowledge and local systems of governance, local ways of living. And of course, when you have inclusion and you have that full, true partnership and participation, then if you have transparency about that and you have inclusion, the equity and the equitable sharing will flow from that when communities are partners. And then, another point that I wanted to make is that, beyond just the inclusion of communities for the benefit of the communities themselves, the inclusion of communities in the decision-making, in the planning, in the understanding of what the drivers around deforestation or the needs for restoration are, a project developer, right, will benefit from that knowledge. You have a much greater chance of success in a project in terms of the carbon outcomes as well as the social outcomes when the community is involved and on board, understanding the drivers, understanding the economic needs, understanding the social structures is critical to the overall success of that project. So it is not a magnanimous decision either to work in partnership. And more, there are many communities and highly organized community organizations that are ready and able to engage as the leaders in developing these types of projects, as well as influencing the policies that then shape treatment of forests, conservation, shaping of policies around rights in jurisdictions. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to say about what are some of those key components.
Right.
Another thing that I would add for folks who are interested in, if you're procuring, interested in partnering with communities, interested in procuring credits, is that in addition to standards at the project level, or in some cases at the jurisdictional scale, that lay out very specific criteria and guidance for this type of consultation, inclusion, transparency, and accountability of information. I think it's also really important for folks who are really interested in the social benefits and aspect to go beyond the standard, because a high quality standard will have those criteria, it will have verification and validation, but a standard is not, a credit is not a credit in every situation. And so if you're really interested in those social benefits, not only for the credits that have already been generated or planned credits, but also pushing further on the boundary of how do we make more inclusive approaches to projects and programs, going beyond with individual due diligence on the site, on the side of, buyer, project developer, is really helpful, not only in assuring that what you're promoting is actually conferring those social benefits as well as the environmental benefits, but also in pushing us all further in terms of how do we view communities as partners in this process. So I will stop.
Great, thank you, Christina. Well, Rosendo, I think we've established that community involvement is very important, and important from the very beginning. However, I'm really curious for you to talk about how do you actually fundamentally make that happen? Because, for example, if I sit around the kitchen table with 4 people, I can't always get my 4 people to agree. How do you actually walk a community through this process? I'd love to hear about these phases that you go through and some of the, wins and challenges that you've had.
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I hope that I can summarize all the work we do in 5 minutes. But let's start with FPIC.
You can have as long as you need.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with FPIC. FPIC is something that, at least in Oaxacan communities, has been happening since the communities are communities, because they have a very strong governance structure, which means that they need to go to assemblies, inform people what the different projects and what the different initiatives from their decision makers are, and then the community needs to agree with that. So it's something that at least for projects in Mexico, and especially projects in Oaxaca, is very easy to do. I have to say that communities in Oaxaca are quite particular, because they need to fully understand what's happening with the project, how much they are going to be involved, and also what are the risks that the community is taking when they are developing a project. For those who doesn't know about this, Oaxaca was concession, or at least Oaxacan forests were concession for a number of years, for more than 30 years. So communities in Oaxaca always are, or are always seeing private parties or private investors as something that could take out of balance their social organization. So you have to be very cautious on how to approach a community, at least again in Oaxaca, it's most of my expertise there. How you have to be very cautious about how to approach and how to present information to communities, because at least in Oaxaca, you can have people that doesn't fully understand Spanish, but also among those people you can have people that it's very well prepared, that has gone to other countries, has gone to other parts of Mexico. They have done some PhD studies, some master's studies, so they understand the world differently, and they have incorporated the technical knowledge into their cosmovision. And when people starts to feel like you are not being completely honest and transparent with the information you are presenting, they start to have a negative view on whatever you are presenting. Mm-hmm. So for us, for ICICO, since we are conformed, and this is something I didn't say at the beginning, since we are conformed by the communities, which means that communities have full rights to vote and to decide over the project and all the activities that we as a technical part of the organization do, then we have to be very cautious about maintaining a high standard of representativity for the organization, but also a high standard of quality for the things we do. Which means that we need to be very transparent with all the communities that we work with, but also we work in such a way that we are always looking to have all the benefits coming down to the communities. We need to ensure that that's happening. And one way of doing that is involve the communities throughout the whole process. So if you go to Oaxaca and you visit our project, you will know that communities have the whole information of what's happening in the project. We are working right now with 11 communities that are working on their car, but long before that happened, we were working since the year 2000, bringing 12 communities into the Mexico volunteer carbon market. We started developing projects on their car in 2014. Now communities are receiving a lot of money coming from the international volunteer market, and we are now preparing them to be able to use that money in such a way that they will have permanent benefits in the long run. Because what we have seen in many projects is across Mexico is that all of those processes are not taken into consideration. They only fulfill what the standard says, and then after that, it's not clear what the communities are doing in order to ensure that the benefits will remain across time. What we are doing right now, and this is something that I also need to say, is that it means a lot of work. We are working closely with the communities. We are doing a lot of workshops with them. Sometimes those workshops can extend up to 5 sessions of 2 days, which means that communities need to be fully involved in what they are planning. We are trying to make them understand that if they use the money in a smart way, they will get benefits, or they will start to create their own benefits, and those benefits will remain no matter what happens with the carbon offset market in the near future or in the long term. So we are trying to create a structure in where communities can decide over the money that it's coming into them, and protecting the forest, which is the main objective of our project. Our project was born because we didn't see a lot of interest in the government on investing into conservation and into doing the good thing with the environment. And communities decided to enter the carbon offset market just to be able to have some funds that will enable them to do conservation of their forest. This is something that is very different in Mexico. As well as some indigenous tribes here in the US, in Mexico, there is a lot of attachment to the land. It's very difficult to make someone from a community leave their community. And they have a special attachment to the land.
Right.
So in order to preserve that land, they need to do a lot of activities. Netzer here, he's the president of the organization. He always says that communities, no matter if they have money or not to do conservation activities, they will do it culturally, because communities are very interested on conserving their natural resources, but also ensuring that their inhabitants and the next generations are going to be able to enjoy those natural resources. So
We hear that often,
Yes,
right?
yes.
That part of the passion is, saving it not just for the next generation, but for generations to come. Right, and that is so important in the work that you all do.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm sorry.
No, please, go ahead.
And that's why we want communities to be fully involved, but also go beyond what the standard is
Right.
telling us to do.
So transparency, constant communication, making sure that the message is communicated accurately and consistently. I hear a lot of that. I am curious, both from Rosendo and Javier, how has the perception of the community changed since the Carbon Project was implemented? Have you seen changes? Have you seen more positivity? Have you seen more, I'm just curious, how has the community adopted as the phases of the Carbon Project have gone on? And Javier, if you'd like to start, please.
No, thank you. And I think you have to take a step back in regards to, we appreciate Christina mentioning the free and informed consent, free and prior and informed consent. I think for not only the development of time of looking at what those indigenous rights and advocacy are really about. And so if you're looking at the extractive industries that have extracted the wealth out of whether it's lands, waters, wildlife, that it has not included the benefit to indigenous peoples. And again, the state of California now is hiring and having leadership as well as staff. We're sharing our stories, again, with our brothers and sisters, not only in Mexico and First Nations, but in Brazil, Colombia, Bolivia, Panama, and we're really comparing those notes. And the one thing that we do have is that platform. And, when we have that platform, we also not only empower, but also encourage. So one of the things, whether it's the Governor's Climate and Task Force, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, ILO 169, all these mechanisms are trying to not only advocate, but provide that platform. One of the things we do is in our advocacy and strategic action is purchasing supply chains. But we also look at indigenous leaders who are advocating for their rights should not be killed and should not be assassinated for advocating for their rights. And if there's businesses associated with that within the carbon markets, we're going to call it out, and we're going to make sure that that business does not interact not only with the governments. We did have a recent brother in Ecuador that happened to, but it's every day. And so as we look at those different dynamics, yes, communities are benefiting. Yes, those ideas, but the history of that. So we're not just putting Band-Aids on it. And that's what I'm saying. Sometimes there's a paradigm shift. But when you upset and disrupt those economies in a very true way of financial institutions, contractual language of really who has the rights to do what, we're not shy about that. But there are going to be times where, again, for us, revenue's been used for, one, our natural resources management costs. Two, we have critical services that are not provided by anybody else, but for the Yurok Tribal Council and government to be able to provide those critical services. And then three, we also purchased one of the largest private collections of Yurok ceremonial items that were taken, but were here in Malibu. So we've provided seed money to the Redwood Canoe Adventure Program. So we're looking at exponential growth. We also, in that exponential growth, within the capacities within the Yurok tribe, are partnerships with technical experts, academic institutions. They come onto the lands and they learn from those lands as well. So we have those academic partnerships with Yale, Harvard, UCLA, Stanford, University of Pennsylvania, Dartmouth. And so we have to create that data sovereignty as well, so you can cite to the data we're citing to, not just say, hey, the Yurok tribe is saying this, but it's that academic and business modeling that's going to be within those structures. It may not say Yurok in it, but those principles are going to be within that. And I think one of the other aspects that our communities have changed, because we do have diverse perspectives of carbon markets, not only within our community, but within the greater indigenous peoples anyways. But that's a good thing, but it works for us. It's an expression of our inherent sovereignty, and we're going to continue to grow that. But again, for example, verifiers come onto our projects and into our forests. And here at the conference, it's a blessing to hear some of the individuals now that was one of their first projects they worked on, whether it's Phase 1 or CKGG. And if you know our terrain, you know that it's not nice sometimes. And to see that shared experience, to have them have that same passion and love for Yurok ancestral territories, I think, in a blessing. So it's not only going to be measured legally, politically, economically, but culturally. And that's why we're at the Davos World Economic Forum. That's what we present at the United Nations. The Yurok tribe supported the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People when the US, Canada, New Zealand all opposed it. It's common knowledge now. But when you stand up for what you believe in and why you believe in it, it's going to make a difference. And so it's not just about money for the Yurok tribe in our carbon markets. There's a portfolio approach to it. There's an understanding and a respect to grow that. And we just appreciate moving forward and want to be part of the next generation of not only carbon markets, but natural resources management.
That's right. It's a process for sure. Science is not perfect. Wildlife, nature is not perfect. But if we can all learn from each other. We're definitely seeing forward progress. Christina, could you talk to us a little bit about what are some of the different approaches of land use? I believe that you talked about, avoided versus removals.
Yeah.
Let's do just a quick tutorial on land use and social communities and how, different projects can be developed or approached.
Yeah, I think as you and I were discussing this earlier, sort of picking up on the conversation that has been, there are pieces of it throughout the conference and a lot of the discussion around land use and some of the questions around challenging markets, market-based approaches when it comes to land use change in forests. So just to say that, the question of should we be doing, is it project-based approaches or is it jurisdictional programs? Is it avoided deforestation that we should be working on, or is it removals, right? What is the space? And for corporates that are making commitments, where is the space that it's most effective or less risky, or more beneficial, more quickly to invest in? And so I just wanted to say that from my perspective, it's not a voluntary. We had this morning voluntary or compliance markets. It's not voluntary or compliance. It's not jurisdictional or projects. It's not avoided emissions or removals. We need all of those things. And when it comes to there are different pieces that we get at in all of those at all of those levels and with all of those approaches. But when it comes to the social and community benefits, and when it comes to increasing the recognition of rights for communities to territorial lands, when it comes to making sure that there is equitable and transparent benefit sharing, that we are promoting long-term social well-being and sustainable economic development on community lands in forests and other ecosystems, the principles are the same, whether you're talking about jurisdictional, whether you're talking about, and the complexity is the same.
That's right.
Whether you're talking about, jurisdictional, there are more layers of stakeholders, right? There are more layers of government involved in that, but the complexity is the same, whether you're talking about reforestation or avoided deforestation. Jurisdictional approaches are, they are complex, and that takes longer potentially than project development. Also backstops project success when you have jurisdictional policies that reinforce that. So just making the point that the principles about the inclusion and the social benefits and the way that you approach communities should flow down from whether you're talking about international standards for developing, reducing deforestation or reforestation efforts to subnational to project level, and throughout that entire suite of approaches that you take to forests, that local communities and particularly communal territories and indigenous territories are absolutely critical, and I think our key to success is going to be making sure that we are absolutely incorporating the social components, and with that partnership and promoting leadership from communities and enabling leadership from communities. In some cases, maybe that's just getting out of the way.
I think we'd all agree we need it all, and we need it now, right? Yeah. As Dee will famously say all the time, we need it all and we need it now. I think it's also interesting that, most people who reach out to us who are interested in how do I start a carbon project, or how do I, where do I even go? They start with, as Christina was saying, the complexity of the choices, where perhaps what we should be thinking about is the simplicity of starting with the community, starting with what you know. I'll also add, our panelists are incredible forestry experts and have, deep expertise where I don't. I did want to mention, though, that as far as types of carbon projects, Forestry is incredibly important. We've got to protect our standing forests just as much as we have to plant new ones. But there's also grasslands that need to be protected. We have 2 grassland projects in Colorado. Grasslands are incredibly important from an ecological perspective. And there's also a tremendous amount of work being done in soil, okay? All of those types of projects also have tremendous community benefits with them as well, benefits to biodiversity as well. So this is a much broader discussion and can include a lot of different things. So Rosendo, back to you. I'm sure well, we get this question all of the time, so I'm just curious, and I can help support with some other examples as well, but when you involve the community and when you can show that, do you see an increase in the price that you're able to get for the credits that you then bring to market?
Yes, I think that thanks to all the people that has been interested in our projects throughout the years, having the people involved and having the people being able to present what the project means to them has been a good leverage for better prices, but also has enabled the community and the community inhabitants to know that they have something in between their hands, that it's working, and that then can change the way they either manage the land, or in some cases we have seen a positive change in how the people sees the land. You ask, Javier, how people changes their vision on the land not so long ago, and I do believe that people, when they see a diversification of not just the income, but also the activities they can do with the land, it changes their vision, it makes them start understanding in the world in a different way.
Sure.
And we would love to go. I was very glad to get to know Javier this year, but also I saw him speaking last year during the conference. And that's the level we want to bring our communities to. However, we understand that it's a process, and processes takes a lot of time. Right now, we are trying to strengthen the communities from the inside, just to prevent those external factors that Javier was talking about. We always believed in starting from within and then moving forward outside. So we will love to participate in policy making, but we need to be able to deliver something that is credible, that it's trusted, but also then we can show that works. So right now we are trying to construct all of those things from within the organization and within the communities to be able to present that in the near future, I hope, to both policymakers and also to the world in general.
Very good. Javier, would you like to also address that question? Do you feel that community involvement and your ability to actually demonstrate that, because it's clear, has given the price of your credits an increased value?
Yes, I think there's a direct correlation on the economic quantification of Yurok-specific direct environmental benefit tribal offsets. So we, number one, look at what that price is, but number two is, more importantly, is again that fundamental change. Is this buyer or is this industry leader going from an extractive to regenerative economies? Do they support indigenous rights? Do they provide or invest in what that green technologies or renewables might look like? So we're still in our infancies, right, on the Yurok Reservation. We still have no electricity on some portions of our reservation in the fourth largest economy in the world. And so when we ask for that higher price or set that standard for that niche, and again, it's not just about the money. We do appreciate that, we do recognize that, we do value that, but we also look at what is that holistic approach of how this is going to benefit not only the infusion of the success of our projects, but we have a fourth one coming as well. So we're growing. We're not in the voluntary space at this point. We're looking at that. We're looking at the various other protocols. But at the end of the day, like I said, we do have the most advanced LiDAR company that went live on June 1st. We released the 8 condors in the last, which hasn't existed in the last 100 years. So it's that melding of both the old is new again, and be able to reflect that within our carbon pricing is, I think, not only critical, but again, on the other end, I think the industry and the market has to react to that too. We keep hearing about the trillions of dollars it's going to take to fix what's going on that disproportionately impacts indigenous peoples in the community. All this catastrophic fires, all the catastrophic flooding, earthquakes impact indigenous peoples first, and that's not right. So if we're going to talk the trillions of dollars of investment, it has to start with those indigenous communities.
Very good. To Christina's point, I believe, whether voluntary or compliance, I think we could speak, from years of experience. Every person or corporate, regardless of size, wants to know that their dollar is making a difference, whether it's voluntary or compliance. And we see time and again, no matter the state of the RFP, the top questions are, how is the local community impacted? These are the first questions they're asking. And it's not only on the front end that I think makes a difference. It's actually a year later. They want to know what was done with the carbon finance, what was the outcome of it, right? And the questions are getting more sophisticated, which is, the right way for it to be, right? So anyway. All right, I would love to, and I'll stand up now just so I can see everybody. We would love to have some questions from the audience. If anybody has any questions, please let us know. Oh, we have hands already. All right, sir, you first, and then I'll get to you in the back. And if you want to ask the question, here, actually, I'll be Vanna White. I'll come over here. You can just ask your question.
Thank you. Hi. Octavio Lopez, Nación Verde. This question is, you have the HIDOs, and the HIDO is receiving the money. And my question is, once they receive the money, are they split evenly among them? What they begin to do with this money? Are you helping out with what to do with that money? Because maybe it's a lot of money and they won't receive that. And maybe that could create some conflict down the community. If you think about that, like I hear that some people win the lottery and it's not too good. So maybe if you can share your experience, what is happening? And also to Mr. Javier, have you reached out to other tribes, some other tribes, there's a coalition or something that try to work together for restoration in native areas in other spaces, and in that collaboration, how does that begin, or how do that gets to be? Thank you.
Sure. Let's start with the question for Rosendo, and then Javier, we'll go to you.
Okay. Thank you for the question, and also thank you for the winning the lottery comparison. It's a good one. We don't want that happening in our communities. We understand that communities are very complex, and that they have, we are dealing with people here, and dealing with people is always very, very difficult. So, and when you bring interests, when you bring money into the community, that creates more interest from people with good intent, but also with not good intent. So what we want to do is what we are trying to do is having a democratic space in where all community members can come and can decide what to do with the money. That's what I was talking about, the workshops that we do with communities. In those communities, we understand that you can have different issues and different problematics from one community to the other, and those problematics can be very, very different and very, very complex as well. So what we do is we do an assessment with the community. We based our approach always from the community side. And we bring them together. We make them analyze what the problematic with the community is, and based on that, we make them propose solutions to those problematics. And it's a very long process. It's a very complex process. But at the end, what we want from them, or what we make them do, is come up with a bunch of solutions. But also, they have to identify how expensive are those solutions. And they realize that no matter how much money it's coming from either forest harvesting or forest enterprises or carbon offsets, if they don't do something in order to take the control over what's happening, they will have always the same issues and always the same problems. So carbon offset money has helped us provide that assessment for each community, but also come up with a long-term planification that communities are going to start doing in order to overcome those issues. And the problem is not creating the planification for the community. The problem is doing the follow-up to that planification. And that's another whole animal that we need to find a way how to write. And that's why we are creating, we are conforming a group of professionals in order to make that happen and to do the follow-up that it's gonna be the key factor to prove that these things can work in the long term.
Rosendo, you and ICICO have your process of facilitating the conversation, but letting the community make the decisions, I think, is really unique. So, I mean, it's just key. They have a way of getting them all to talk, and ultimately they decide, which is, I think, incredible buy-in. So, Javier, would you like to address the second question?
No, absolutely, and thank you for the question. Not only within our carbon market and carbon project space, but just in our natural resources division, the ability, somebody's helped us 200 years ago, right, both tribal and non-tribal, so we implement that in everything we do. So as being the first in the cap and trade market, we've probably had anywhere from 20 to 30 countries and subnational indigenous groups worldwide. In 2018, we had a strategic session bringing tribes from Indonesia, again, Brazil, Panama. I've been to Brazil. We also were in Amapá, Manaus, Acre. So that technical advice is very critical, but also just the cultural exchange, which we call cultural diplomacy, is key and vital. We're working with the Kanaka out of Maui, Hawaii, the Maori out of New Zealand, the Seminole and Miccosukes out of Florida, and the Passamaquoddy out of Maine, setting up baseline climate impact areas in brackish areas where freshwater meets saltwater, forest confluences of rivers, as well as the mycelial network and how climate change is impacting those lives. So that data sovereignty is going to be important as well. So it's the coders, programmers. So with our consultants as well, we also encourage them to hire native or indigenous peoples to be able to learn that technical expertise. And I think that's going to be what the future is. So I appreciate you joining the journey.
Thank you, Javier.
Yeah, hi, thank you. My name is Michael Leschke. I'm the Director of Certification Programs at Center for Resource Solutions. My question for all of you is around disinformation. And I'm not too familiar with forestry, so I'll give a comparable example in the renewable energy industry. So let's say there's a rural community where there's a lot of fallow farmland, and there are solar developers or wind developers that want to see wind farms or solar plants built on that farmland. It would benefit the farmer by the farmer being paid for the use of his land. It would benefit the local community by displacing fossil fuels from the grid. But then you get, and not to point the finger at one industry, but let's say a fossil fuel association pumps millions of dollars into the local community, just flooding the zone with disinformation, like wind farms make noise that will cause you to go deaf by age 50, or the metal that's being used in a solar plant will cause cancer. And sometimes all it takes is one person from the local community to start to listen to that, and that disinformation can spread. So my question for you guys is, how do organizations like yours that have the local community's best interests at heart, how do you help combat some of that disinformation so that everybody is aware of the facts on the ground?
Ooh, who wants that question?
I'll take it. No, you have to understand what the fundamental investment is, though. So if those industries, and I'll say this, there's a responsibility on both sides. Industry themselves pick up your game. If you're going to allow that type of action and corporate responsibility and actions, that's on you too. So what, again, we're trying to do is change that mindset and consciousness. So you're saying 100 million, and I'm not going to necessarily get into hypotheticals because we know right now, right, the real estate market, when they find out the Yurok tribe's trying to buy lands, they mark it up 5 to 10 times the fair market value. Not because they want more money, it's because they fundamentally do not want tribes and indigenous peoples to have title to their lands. So we're not making no mistake about that. So again, that's all both on the tribal side as well as the industry side. So we're also a mill owner, right? So as a mill owner, we're trying to set up that data that says economically it is not in your interest to clear cut. But you can't just say that, right? You have got to have the data and the investment supply chain information behind that. So that's how we deal with misinformation. Because again, right now, today, there are those interests in the state of California, in Humboldt and Del Norte County, that truly hate Indian people. We're removing 4 dams right now, 2 out of California, 2 out of Oregon. That took 25 years for the fish, for the Yurok people. But it doesn't just benefit Yuroks. It benefits the region and it benefits the ecosystems. So when you get into that jurisdictional aspect, but I appreciate your question. I hope I answered it.
I would say it gets back to trust, don't you all believe? Okay, we have lots of questions and we have 4 minutes. Okay, let me sprinkle it up a little bit. Ma'am?
Hi, Megan Bamba from Aspiration. I had a question about the difference between following best practices for involvement and FPIC versus community ownership and management of a project. And should we be, as an industry, moving towards enabling more ownership as a question? And then what would it take to make that happen?
Yeah, that's great.
You know, in less than 4 minutes.
Thank you. Christina Rosendo?
Okay, I think that I don't know where the market's going to move, but for us, it's important to for communities to feel that they own the projects. So it's a process that we have always been supportive of, and it's mainly because that's how ICICO is configured. ICICO, again, is conformed by the communities, and we work for the community's best interest. So yeah, I think that we are always pushing for the communities to fully understand the process and to appropriate all of the processes that comes from developing a project.
Sir?
Thank you. I'm Wolf with Evergreen Carbon. So what, generally under land use, what barrier or gap do you see like being critical that needs to be overcome? And where would that lie? Is it with the project developers? Is it with the registries and the methodologies? Is it the jurisdiction and the governments? Or is it something else that you have wonderful projects? Why aren't all land use projects as great as yours? That would be the question.
So I think your question was, how do we scale this good stuff? Yeah. Yeah, and
How do we demand social benefits?
yeah. With the social benefit. I mean, I think we've made tremendous progress, right? And that progress has accelerated recently. I think one of the things that helps accelerate that progress is getting past the chicken and egg problem of supply and demand. So supply of high quality programs and projects that are generating credits out of reducing deforestation, or in the case of removals projects, pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. That takes time, but it will happen. And having the demand to know that there's going to be financing to compensate that, right? So building jurisdictional programs or even implementing projects with high qualities of standard. You talked about the workshops, you talked about the engagement, the work with the communities. That takes resource that's resource intensive, process. So in terms of having the investment upfront to be able to start to develop and with the community, implement and, develop, plan, implement a project, as well as for jurisdictions that are looking at how do we reduce wall to wall our deforestation within our state or province or within our country. That is something that takes financing to set up, and it's the financing that will be needed to halt deforestation and reverse deforestation far outstrips anything that public funding can provide. There has to be private sector and funding out there, a market for it, and I think incredibly happy to see that market seems to have arrived, but you have to have the two things come together, right?
How would you overcome that barrier? Do you think what, you had your druthers, there's hedge fund managers at this conference, there's all kinds of people. Last year, there were people like, hey, I'm finance, I got all this money. They didn't know where to put it and kind of what to do. And so how would you see kind of getting over this financial hurdle?
I think we need to stay the course. I think we need to understand that it's complex, but we have the keys to it. We have the answers. We have successful models, and we need to stay the course in terms of the financiers having the patience to understand what some of that complexity, but the fact that the answers are there, and to stay the course as partners. Right? This isn't instantaneous, but it is real. It is absolutely necessary, and we can do it.
Yes.
We can do it.
And Christina, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we are at time. This is an absolutely important discussion, so thank you for bringing it up. And maybe we do a whole session on it, right? But it is true, we need finance. People need to be paid for ecosystem services. And we need to take the amazing learnings from these people and bring them forth to other communities as well. Thank you, everyone. I'm sorry I didn't have time to get to everyone's questions, but we're definitely here if you want. They need this room though, right? Yeah, so we'll be out here for a bit if you, because I know we didn't get to everybody's questions. Again, thank you.
Thank you.